Welcome, welcome. I am trying to get some music playing to start us out.
Hey, sugar. Come on over here,
But
sweetie.
it's probably a little bit louder than
Let's
I want
break
it
it
to be
down.
because it's my glycolysis song.
Glycolysis is a series of
And
reactions.
I'm just going to stop that right now. And that wasn't really the way that I wanted to start, but now this is the way that I wanted to start. I wanted to start by just greeting you and saying hello and thanking all of you for joining me. I'm losing track of what number session this is, but I do know that tomorrow is a very important day. Tomorrow marks 3 weeks exactly between the AP Bio exam, and I am going to be here with you through a set schedule that you can see at learn-biology.com/live/reviews, and then putting that in our comments. So you should be able to see that. Anyhow, you can see that schedule and you can go there, and that's going to be great. I'm going to do a couple of changes here. I'm just going to go to change that virtual background to, yeah, I mean, this is the reality. I think I'm going to get a white background at some point, but I think we're just going to go with green for right now. And the white background would be much more aesthetically pleasing, but you don't really care about that. But anyhow, here we are. We're going to do some review, and I'm very excited. I'm very excited to do this because doing this is my favorite thing, teaching biology. And I'm hoping that everything is going well, and I'm hoping that everybody can hear me. And I'm wondering if people can. Let's see, that looks pretty good. That looks pretty good. Everything's on. Not sure who's in the audience, but if you were in the audience and you could just give me a little bit of feedback, like thumbs up, Mr. Lily, thank you so much. Fantastic. Okay, that's exactly what I needed. And so good to see my friends who are coming regularly to this session. I'm feeling like I'm coming to know you, even though I don't really, but you know, that's just the reality of this kind of YouTube thing where I'm on the screen and you're on the other end of a comment thread. So here we are, live review session. One thing I'll tell you a little bit more later is that I just did my first live Zoom session. And these live Zoom sessions are super fun because, you know, it's more fun when you can easily ask questions as opposed to just asking them through the comment threads. But there is a sort of bar that you need to exceed, and that bar is purchasing a subscription to learn-biology.com. It's the best bargain in biology education because you not only get incredible interactivity, which gives you feedback that leads to learning, but you also get me. You also get me because I'm going to be present at those Zoom reviews. What we do, Lily, on those Zoom review sessions is a lot like this, except it's a lot more personal and it moves a lot faster, and there's not the latency that's associated with YouTube. So it's just a million times better teaching environment. And in fact, you know, you got a whiteboard. There's a million things that you can do. So $24.95 for a student individual subscription for learn-biology.com. And I just hope that all of you do that because I'd love to be able to serve you better. And I will be able to serve you better as we move towards the AP Bio exam in that context. So again, you know, $24.95, what's that? Go to Gordo's in Berkeley and you get yourself 2.5 burritos and you're at $24.95, I think. So anyhow, that's what the Zoom review sessions are. They're really super fun. So I hope that folks join me, and that's going to be great. So let's talk about where we are. I told you the plan for this really early on in the first sessions, which is I wanted to finish the course. So most people nationwide are finishing up Unit 8, and we're going to do that too. So tonight we're going to handle population growth and community ecology. We've already done the first 2 topics in previous sessions, which are responses to the environment, energy flow through ecosystems. You can look on the Science Music Videos channel and look at some previous shows if you want to see them. The energy flow through ecosystems was particularly fun because there was a lot of music. And anyhow, tonight we'll be doing population growth and community ecology, and tomorrow night we're going to do the rest of ecology. We'll look at biodiversity and something called the Simpson's Biodiversity Index, and we'll look at disruptions to ecosystems. Kind of a bummer of a way to end the course as the last topic, but that's what it's all about. That's who we are on this planet in this moment in the Earth's history, in this moment in evolutionary history. And it's a big responsibility. We're not going to talk about that much. That would more, I mean, it's really silly to segment these things, but that's the kind of thing that you would talk about more in an apes class or something like that. So just to introduce myself, though I think everybody knows me, I'm not sure. I'm Glenn Wolkenfeld, also known as Mr. W. I'm a retired AP biology teacher. I spent most of my adult life teaching biology at Berkeley High School. And for a huge portion of that time, I taught AP Bio. And my students were incredibly successful. Most of them got 4s and 5s, and that was always an incredible joy and incredible validation. But I think also that was largely due to, especially in my latter years as a teacher, because I wrote this interactive website called learn-biology.com. It's the one that I've been encouraging you to sign up for, because it takes all of my accumulated wisdom as a teacher and puts that interactivity into software form that's available to you 24/7. With your subscription to learn-biology.com, and you sign up over here, learn-biology.com/apbiology for $24.95, you also get access to the Biomania AP Bio App, which is a $19.95 value. So basically you're getting everything for just a couple of dollars. And I'll tell you more. We are coming out. In fact, we've come out with a new version of the Biomania app that looks even cooler than the one that is shown there. It's got more features. It's got a better interface. And again, it's AP Biology in your pocket, and you won't believe how much you'll learn. So here's what we're going to do tonight. Population growth, and then we're going to talk about community ecology. And that is a little sign that I'm seeing behind my head. That's very interesting. That is what we're going to be doing. And here are some of the questions that we're going to look at. We're going to look at exponential growth and when it occurs. And I need to change myself by going like this. Here we are. Yeah, there we are. What is logistic growth? What is the logistic growth model? And what is the exponential growth model? I feel like I said that twice. Exponential growth, where does it occur? I think I meant for my third bullet point to be something like, what is carrying capacity? Oh, well. So exponential growth. Let's just sort of transition into this a little bit. There's really only 4 things that affect the growth of a population. And you can make this complicated, but let's just keep it simple. If you're measuring the population of a place like my hometown, Berkeley, California, it's only 4 things. Who's born in that town? Who dies in that town? Who comes in? Who goes out? So those are sort of like the 4 factors that influence population growth. And under certain conditions, that growth can be exponential. And exponential growth is simply, like the simplest answer is growth that increases over time. And why is that? It's because the growth of the population is proportional to the amount already present. It's always easy, I tell my students, to think about this in terms of money. You know, if you've got your money in the bank at a fixed rate of interest, like 3% or something like that. Well, if you got $100 and it's growing at 3%, then at the end of the year, keeping it simple interest, you'd have $103. And then in the next year, it would be $103 times 3%. And then, maybe that moves you up to 106. And, over time, what will happen is that the amount of increase will go up and up and up. And any fixed growth rate will get you exponential growth. It just happens faster when there's a higher growth rate. So this is 140%. This is 130%. The bigger the population, the bigger the increase. And the formula is N over T, or delta N, equals the rate times the number. So N is the population size, T is time. Rate of equals the rate of increase times the population. All right. So I don't think it's very likely that you'll have to compute that on the AP Bio exam because it's pretty easy computation. But if you did, you shouldn't have any trouble with that. Now, exponential growth, does it ever really occur in biological systems? Well, it doesn't ever occur for very long. We live on a finite planet. That's maybe one of the biggest messages of a course like AP Environmental Science, which this is not. But the planet is finite. It's got a fixed amount of energy coming in. There's a fixed amount of land. So an exponential growth process can't go on forever. Eventually, it burns itself out. So it's always limited, but it can happen for short periods of time, and that happens when a population has pretty much ideal resources. So what are some examples of that? Well, when an invasive species comes into a new area, there are like famous videos about the arrival of this kind of toad called the cane toad into Australia and how it just spread all over that continent with nothing able to hold it back. If you get an infection, a bad bacterial infection, once that bacterial species breaches the defenses of your immune system and gets inside you, it can grow exponentially. And then your immune system has to rally and beat it back. And the early phase of an epidemic or a pandemic, to talk about something unpleasant that we all just lived through. But, I remember, I don't know if you did the same thing I did, but, if you're taking AP Bio, you were alive and well and conscious and everything while this was happening. And I used to go to various websites and I'd look at the number of people who were infected by COVID-19, and it grew just like this. And we have moments when there are new strains that start to grow exponentially, and then eventually they'll burn out. So that is what exponential growth is. Exponential growth is closely related to an idea called biotic potential. And biotic potential is the maximum rate at which a population can expand. It's usually represented by R max. Every population, even the slowest breeding population, has a fixed biotic potential. Humans have a fixed biotic potential. There's only so many offspring that humans can produce, and we've produced a lot, and that's how we got our human population to the number that it's at right now, which is pretty phenomenal. Elephants have an Rmax, and so do bacteria, and so do crickets, and everything has an Rmax, the maximum number that can be produced. But things don't grow at their maximum number, and that's because every environment has a carrying capacity for each species. And that carrying capacity is represented as K, little typo over here, sorry about that. And that's the maximum number of individuals that a particular environment can support. And that leads to many cool issues, like, for example, what's the carrying capacity of planet Earth for humans? Nobody knows. But it actually looks like we're not going to reach the carrying capacity for various complex reasons. But, on an island like Catalina Island off the coast of California, what's the carrying capacity for deer? Not a heck of a lot. And in fact, now there are being some measures that are taken to reduce the amount of deer because they can harm the environment, as we'll see. So we talked about the exponential growth model. What you're looking at now is called a logistic growth model. This one, by the way, this is often called a J curve. And for obvious reasons, this is called an S curve. And basically what it does is it shows how a population's growth will, it'll be on the runway and then it'll grow exponentially. But then as it approaches carrying capacity, the growth rate will decrease. And that is letter K over here. I think I was referring to another diagram when I wrote E. Sorry about that. And it's represented by the equation N over T equals the rate of growth times the population multiplied by this factor, K minus N over K. And K is the carrying capacity, and N is the population size. So if the carrying capacity were 100 and the number gets to 98, then whatever your rate of growth is, 100 minus 98, that's 2 over 100. You're only going to grow at what would have been 2% of your otherwise, incredible growth rate when you were in this phase. So as you get closer and closer to the carrying capacity, the growth rate of the population slows. And, this is something that you can model on a spreadsheet. And, there have been many computer models that have been created. But we see this in nature. Populations grow, they reach the carrying capacity, and then their growth slows down. The key idea is that as a population reaches its carrying capacity, there will be increased environmental resistance. The environment pushes back as density-dependent limiting factors slow and then stop a population's growth. Density-dependent, what's that? Well, limiting factors, let's talk about those in general, are factors that prevent a population from increasing at its biotic potential. And they cause a population size to stabilize at or below the environment's carrying capacity. And they can be density dependent or density independent. So let's talk about density dependent limiting factors. And I have a lizard, eating a cricket, preying on it. So, and the reason why I put that there is that, believe it or not, of course you're going to believe it, predation is one of those limiting factors. So density-dependent limiting factors are factors that intensify as the density of individuals within a population increases. So as there get more and more individuals, these density-dependent factors push back more and more. They're like, no, you're not going to grow so fast. So what are some of these? Some of them are extrinsic, and they come from outside the growing population. So like, for example, predation pressure. The more prey there are, the easier it is for predators to find those prey. So, just imagine rabbits running around in a field. The more rabbits there are, the easier it is for the wolves to capture them. So that's density-dependent population limitation. Parasitism. As you crowd together, it becomes much, much easier for viruses, for example, they're a kind of cellular parasite, to jump from one individual to another, or, any other kind of parasite. So parasitism increases as the density of the population increases, and competition between individuals also increases. And what does that competition do? It decreases the available resources. And as those available resources go down, the population's ability to grow also goes down. When there's less food around, the population won't grow as fast. Why is there less food? Because there's more competition. Why is there more competition? Because there's more individuals. So these are all extrinsic, outside of the population's limiting factors. But there's also intrinsic factors. So like, for example, as the population grows denser and denser and denser, there's more and more stress. And stress leads to the release of certain hormones, and that can wind up lowering the birth rate. So that's an intrinsic factor. In other words, it's affecting the bodies of the individuals in that population in a way that limits further population growth. I am going to go on to another topic, but I do just want to make space all the time for people to ask questions. And I also want to let you know that I'll always be prepared for these Zoom sessions, but you know what? Your questions are my number one priority. And I also want to emphasize that, like, after we finish the course, essentially, I've got a plan. Like, we're going to go through a bunch of FRQs and sort of break them down and stuff like that. But I'm totally happy having a session where you just come in and start like chatting, like, Mr. W, don't really have a good handle on photosynthesis. Can we do a review of that? And I can always whip one of those up. Now, those were density dependent factors. There are also density independent limiting factors. And as you might surmise from the name of the term, those are factors that are unrelated to a population size. So examples: hurricanes, floods, earthquakes, all of those things. Like, let's say that there was a family of mice living in this building. And of course, the tragedy, of course, would be a family of people living in that building. And actually, to think of a human example, it really wouldn't matter if there was 10 people in that building or 2. They would have perished due to the earthquake that caused this kind of collapse. So that's a population limiting factor that's independent of density. It doesn't matter if small density or high density. You don't stand a chance in a condition like that. That's true of a hurricane. That's true of a flood. And it's possible that on the AP Bio exam, you could be shown graphs, and then given certain scenarios, you might have to identify when the population control that's at work is density dependent or independent. So what happens if a population surpasses the environment's carrying capacity? Because all of these things involve certain lags. And even though the population might start to slow down as it approaches carrying capacity, there can also be an overshoot where we're overshooting the carrying capacity. So one thing that can happen is this. You can have an overshoot. It's not too severe. You've exceeded the carrying capacity. That usually results in degradation of the environment. And so then there'll be a decline in population, and that'll be followed by an increase and a decline. So you'll have oscillation around K, around the carrying capacity, that's followed by overshoot. But another thing that can happen is this. You have catastrophic overshoot. That's what we're seeing over here. And basically on this graph, these are shrubs, these are deer. And the idea is that the population of deer exploded, way overshot carrying capacity, and the result was degradation of the environment. The number of shrubs went way down. And what's the consequence of that? You wind up having a crash in the population of deer. And I believe this data was taken from Catalina Island in California, but maybe it's just sort of like a fictional model. There's, a whole movement of people who are concerned that, we humans might be in the overshoot. You guys have enough to worry about. After the AP Bio exam, you can Google that term and see what comes up. Let's change things up and let's do something really fun. Let's go to learn-biology.com and let's do some practice. I think I'm going to take you to a different place, though, just to show you a different feature. We go to learn-biology.com. There we are. By the way, if you're interested in signing up, just hit this AP Bio student button. And that takes you to this page, which will describe a little bit about our program. Hit that button, you're good to go. But we're going to go back to here and actually here. And here's our ecology main menu. So this shows you all of the topics that we address in ecology. And at the end of that ecology main menu, we've got a review page with objectives, flashcards, and quizzes. And so we're going to scroll down below those objectives. Flashcards won't be so useful for this context right now, but these are super useful. So okay. You can drill down so you can practice on any particular area that you want to. So I've only got 4 questions, but that's okay. We don't need to go that deep right now. Let's do a little bit of population ecology. Let's do some practice, and let's go. What a fabulous question. Okay. Using fur trapping data from the Hudson Bay Company in the 1800s, a student was able to generate the following graph showing the fluctuation in hare and lynx populations over a 60-year period during the 1800s. Unfortunately, the student forgot to include a key showing which line represented the population of lynx And which line represented the hare? Rabbit adapted to cold climates. Lynx is a predatory cat. So based on the pattern, which of the following letters represents the point when the hare population is in its exponential growth phase? Everybody think about that. Okay, got one choice of D over there. Anybody else? Lily, just to show people what happens when you choose the wrong answer, I'm going to choose another wrong answer. I'm just going to choose this answer over here, B. Okay. No, based on the ideas of trophic levels and energy flow, line number 1 has to represent the population of hare and herbivore, while line number 2 has to represent the lynx. So, Lily, you were right. Good job. Basically, what's going on is that, well, I'm actually not going to say. We sort of just take in that one we know now is the hare, and 2 is the lynx, and let's see what happens when we come back to this question. Okay. Simulate population growth. A programmer writes software based on the logistic growth equation. The program's output looks like this. At what point in the graph does k equals n? You've got 4 choices. A, B, C, D. Anybody? Where does k equals n? Anybody? K equals n? Let's see. K equals n. And indeed, it is D. At D, population growth is ended because the population has reached its carrying capacity, and as a result, the population size will remain constant. You know, this is a mathematical model. It's much messier. Now, here's the thing. At C, we're very close. And Crystal, thank you very much, and it's great to have you here. C, we're slowing down. So at this point, N is a little bit less than K. So N is this line over here. Here it's way below K, way below K. Getting close to K, getting close to K. And this is, if you guys are mathematically minded, it's a limit, like you approach K, but I guess you do get there in this case. But here you are approaching K, and so at C, we're just a little bit below. So Crystal, that was close. It was the second closest answer. All right, next question. I've probably given you this answer in my presentation. The graph below shows what happened on an island off the coast of California during its 30 years following the introduction of a small group of deer. Which of the following best explains what occurred? I'm just going to take a sip of tea while you guys read through those 4 answers. And I'd love to see some stuff in the chat with your answer. Just we're going from the top down, A through D. What do you think the answer is, folks? All right, so let's try Crystal's answer, which is C over here. The deer overshot the carrying capacity. And indeed, point 2 represents the overshoot. By exceeding the carrying capacity of the island shrubs, the deer depleted the resource base, wiping out their food supply and ultimately causing their own demise. Lily, you asked earlier about what's the difference between these live reviews and the Zoom shows that I'm trying to encourage you to do. We can do FRQs. We can have long discussions. Whereas in this context, doing more than like multiple choice, the interactivity is a little bit limited here. I can present, I can get some feedback, but this is why I totally want to encourage you to move with me over to the medium where I'm going to be able to do my best teaching, and you'll have an incredible resource at your disposal, learn-biology.com. Next question. Okay. Duckweed are tiny aquatic plants with a rapid growth rate. A biologist starts with a single duckweed plant and counts the number of plants over a period of 15 days. Which of the following is closest to the average population growth rate between days 4, when the population was 10, and 6, when the population was 50? Okay, so population is about 10 over here, and day 6, when the population is 50. So what's the average population growth rate? This is a kind of mathy question that could show up. And Shiloh, I don't know if that's a hello or a good night, but I'm very glad that you were here with us. So we've got one choice of 20 plants per day. That was what Lily is suggesting. Anybody else have any other ideas? All right, we're going to try B. Outstanding. Growth rate is number on day 6 minus number on day 4 divided by number of days. So we've got 50 minus 10 over 2, right? Because day 4 and day 6, so 20 plants a day. And figuring out the rate of something, absolutely something that might show up on the AP Bio exam. So I would have that skill tucked away really, really well and solid. And here we've got the same question. And one thing that I just wanted to demonstrate is the way that the software on Learn-Biology works is that if you get it wrong the first time, don't stress. Just take in the feedback and think, oh, what could the answer be? We've already established that this number over here is the hare. This number is the lynx. Why is that? Because in any food chain, there have to be fewer predators than there are prey. Just sitting with that sentence for a second, is that always correct? Yeah, I think it is. I could imagine where if the predators were very small and the prey were very big, then that could shift a little bit. But, if they're even moderately matched in size, it's going to be like that. So based on the pattern, which of the following letters when the hare population is in that? So if this is the hare exponential growth phase, the answer is D. And fantastic. And then I also want you to see that you get a summary report that tells you the topic where you got things wrong. And that's great diagnostically. So like, for example, if you were to go to one of our big AP tests, you could see how well you could do a self-assessment and you could learn the areas where you were having weaknesses. All right, back to our show. And what that means is we're going to go here. Yeah. Okay, so fantastic. So our first topic for tonight was population growth, and our second topic is going to be community ecology. We've got a hummingbird with a beautiful long beak that's pollinating a tubular flower. That's kind of the essence of the kind of evolutionary changes that are associated with community ecology, or the evolutionary adaptations that are associated with community ecology. So here are the questions we'll be addressing in this section. What's symbiosis? What are some of its common forms? What are character displacement and niche partitioning? And what is an evolutionary arms race? Okay, so symbiosis basically is whenever two species are closely living together in close proximity. And this is an interactive table. And, I think you'll probably be able to see it. I mean, I can see it on my screen, so you can probably see it on your screen. It's not ideal for this kind of presentation, but I just grabbed this because it's actually an interactive table that you can create on learn-biology.com. And you should probably know almost all of these. Parasitism is incredibly cool, but they wouldn't just dump it on you on the AP Bio exam without telling you what it is. It's a kind of parasitism where one insect lays its egg in the larvae of another species, and it winds up killing off the larvae. It's quite extraordinary, but we're not going to go there right now. Here's just a couple of examples. In parasitism, which is like if your dog is parasitized by worms, people can be parasitized by worms too, then the host is harmed and the parasite benefits. So that's a plus-minus relationship. One organism benefits, the other organism is harmed, plus minus. And you should know that notation because that definitely comes up on the AP Bio exam. In predation, species one benefits, the predator benefits, and the prey is harmed. Of course it's harmed. It's killed and eaten. In mutualism, both species benefit. We need more mutualism on our planet today, but mutualism is like between clownfish and anemones. The clownfish are living above the anemone and they're kind of messy eaters, and so the food comes out of their mouth, and they really didn't show this on Finding Nemo, but also when the clownfish poops, the anemone eats the poop. The anemone doesn't care. So anyhow, that's how the anemone benefits, and anemones have stinging tentacles, and therefore they create a protective environment because they have evolved to not sting the clownfish. So that's mutualism. There are many examples of mutualism. And I'm wondering what else you should know. There's commensalism, which is when one species benefits and the other doesn't affect the other species. There's amensalism, where species one is unaffected, but species two is harmed. That is probably not that important to know. I would know commensalism. I would know everything on this list except for possibly amensalism and parasitism. And I would know the notation. I would know how it affects the interacting species. Now we're going to look at two of these interactions in a little bit more depth. And the first one that we're going to look at is competition. This is a kind of famous experiment in ecology where an experimenter named Gauss worked with species of paramecia. Paramecia are these little single-celled protists. He found one species that was a bottom dweller and another species that liked to forage near the surface. Now, these are microscopic, but you can see them with a microscope, and so you can do a census of them, you can check their density, and so on and so forth. So when these two species were put together, species A and species C, bottom dweller and surface forager, they both coexisted very happily. There was no negative interaction. So here they both live. But when you have species A, a bottom dweller, and species B, another bottom dweller, and you put them together, species A did okay, but species B was wiped out. And here's the principle. Two competitive species can't coexist in the same ecological niche, and I should add in the same place, because if there's a different location, they can coexist, but same place, same niche, only one species. A niche is the way an organism makes its living. So, eating at the bottom, that's the way that this paramecium made its living, that's its niche. So the niche of these two species was different enough so that they could coexist. The niche of these two species overlapped, so they could not. That's one of the effects of competition. When Starbucks moves into a neighborhood where there's some sweet little coffee shop, it's often the sweet little coffee shop that goes out of business. Why? Because those businesses are in the same ecological niche, and it's Gauss's competitive exclusion principle at work. Now, what happens because of competition over evolutionary time? In ecological time, one species will go extinct. But over the long years of species competing, what results is what's called niche partitioning. Because of competition, either one or more species will become extinct, or the competing species will evolve in a way to partition the resource that they're competing for. So the resource here is the sandy shore, right? The sandy shore. But all of these birds are dividing up the resource. The flamingo's eating in a deeper area. The duck is eating in a less deep area. Here we have one that's taking the sand in this area. This one's actually out of the water altogether, as is this one. So they've divided up the niche partitioning. It's like you don't just have a shorebird, you have 5 different species that are sharing the area. And sharing makes it think like nature's all in harmony. This resulted from competition followed by evolution, survival of the fittest. So it wasn't the sweetest process that led to this, but in long term, the evolutionary consequence is exactly this. And the result is, with that kind of niche partitioning, and in fact, in order for that niche partitioning to happen, you have selection for different traits, for different characters. And that's called character displacement. Notice how, like, for example, the legs and the beaks of all of these birds are slightly different. Characters are traits, and basically what we have is differentiation into specific niches that are narrower. We go from a general niche shorebird to a specific one. So what results from competition? Niche partitioning, character displacement. And here's the example that I just told you about. Using that, can you explain what's going on in this graph? A graph which, in various forms has definitely appeared on the AP Bio exam. Definitely appeared. So these are the finches that live on the Galapagos Islands. And we've got one set of islands where we've got three different islands. And hello, Zoe. We are reviewing ecology, and the topic that we're reviewing right now is community ecology. Thank you very much for joining us. Great to have you here. So here's what I want you to know. What we're indicating here on this axis over here is the depth of the beak. In other words, how big the beak is. Like if this were my beak, this would be the beak depth. And some of these birds have a much bigger beak and some of them have a much smaller beak. That's the beak depth difference. So on these 3 islands, I said that totally wrong. I'm going to start again. On these islands, the birds are coexisting on the same island. All right. So all 3 species, G. fulginosa, G. fortis, and G. magnirostrus, I might have misspelled that, are all living on the same island. And notice that fulginosa's beak is much smaller. And then we've got a medium-sized beak over here by fortis and a larger beak over here on magnirostrus. Now, here's another set of islands where all 3 are living together. And again, a similar breakdown. But notice over here, we've got islands that just have 2 species, and then we've got islands with 1 species. And here's my question. On the islands with 1 species, the beak depth overlaps. On the islands with 2 or more species, the beak depth is different. What's different about this island and this island? What's causing the beaks to be of different depths over here, whereas they overlap down here? And I'll just tell you, it's a 2-word answer. And Julietta, thank you so much to be here reviewing with us. I really appreciate it. So can anybody put that in the chat? What's going on that's causing there to be overlap in beak depth on the islands where there's only one species, whereas no overlap on the islands where there's two or more species? Does anybody have an idea? Okay. All right. Lily, I like the way you're thinking. Basically, what we've got is this. On these islands, there's what? Competition. And competition is forcing there to be character displacement. And that character displacement has happened over a relatively short period of time. But remember, this is a hereditary thing. This isn't just like, this isn't the kind of change that comes from lifting weights or lying out in the sun or something like that. These are genetic traits. So on these islands where these birds have lived together for some thousands of years, there's been character displacement that's been caused by competition as each has adapted to a different ecological niche. On the islands where there's just one species, there's no competition. So the beak depth has kind of drifted into an overlap area. And that might be like the most efficient depth for harvesting the most kinds of food. And it might be that a small beak is actually better than a large beak for doing that kind of thing. I wrote something like this. Yeah, on island set A, interspecific competition leading to selective pressure for niche partitioning. Each bird becomes adapted to different types of food, character displacement. And on over here, this actually should have set C. I kind of messed this up a little bit. There's still competition leading to displacement, but on D and E, there's no competition. So character displacement decreases, all right? So this is an important ecological concept that I would really hold in mind as we move towards the AP Bio exam. Now, there's another really cool competition-related concept, and that's the difference between a fundamental niche and a realized niche. And this was, there was a guy named Robert Chalmers who did a bunch of experiments with barnacles off the English coast that established this experiment. I'm not sure of the experimenter's name, but we can all look that up later. So here's the natural distribution of these two species. They have these horrendously complex kind of barnacle names, but we're just going to call them species A, species B. And barnacles, those are like those little, they're actually crustaceans that are sessile. They live on rocks. They start out as mobile larvae, but then they glue themselves down into a position on the rocks. I should have had a picture about this. They sort of stand on their heads for the rest of their lives, kicking food into their mouths. They're quite remarkable creatures. Darwin loved them. He was like a world expert on them. So in nature, here's how they live. But if you scrape away all of species B, look what happens to species A distribution. It can live all the way down here. But if you scrape away species A, species B distribution doesn't change. This says a lot about the niche of animals. And here's the basic idea. A fundamental niche is the range of resources that a species could exploit in the absence of competition. So the fundamental niche of species A, it can live all the way up here, way up high on the high tide line, and all the way down into the intertidal zone. But its realized niche is much narrower. Why is that? Because in the lower part of the intertidal zone, species B outcompetes species A. So that, in this case, shows that for species A, its fundamental niche is much wider than its realized niche because of competition. But species B, its fundamental niche and its realized niche are about the same. This is kind of an intense and heady concept. And again, I always want to emphasize, like, I know that I've been stopping to do questions and things like that, but if you get excited about something and you want to ask a question, put it in the chat. Put it in the chat. I'll be happy to address it. And okay. All right. So we've just looked at the evolutionary consequences of competition. We talked about that in the context of Gauss's competitive exclusion principle. And then we've talked about this in terms of realized niche and fundamental niche. Now let's just talk about coevolution. And as an example, we have a garter snake eating a rough-skinned newt. That's an animal that lives in my part of the world, in Northern California. They are these rough-skinned newts, incredibly poisonous. Like a tiny bit of tissue could kill a person my size. But garter snakes eat them without too much trouble. What's going on? Well, this is what we call a reciprocal adaptation. The garter snake has evolved to tolerate the poison, but the newt keeps on evolving more and more poison. So in other words, predation by one animal is causing a counter adaptation in this animal, which is causing a counter adaptation in this animal. So what we have is a positive feedback loop. And when we think about, like, why are cheetahs so fast? Because antelopes are so fast. The speed of the antelope is determining the speed of the cheetah, right? So that's what's going on. That's how we get these reciprocal adaptations. And like I showed you that beautiful picture of the hummingbird and the flower, the tubular flower of the tube of the flower evolved in response to the beak of the hummingbird, right? And that led to a more specific pollination interaction. So mutualism, parasitism, predation, those can all lead to what are called evolutionary arms races that lead to incredible and wondrous adaptations. Yeah, each species becomes a selective force eliciting counter adaptations in the other species, and that's the result. Okay, we just have time to do a couple of questions, and let's do this. Yeah, let's go here again. That wasn't exactly where I wanted to go, but not bad. Okay, here. That's where I want you to go. Courses, the reason why I want you to go there is because that's where you can sign up for a free account. But now we're going to have some fun. We're going to go to ecology. You know what? Let's not do that. Let me show you something else. Let's go to the AP Bio review page. I've got a whole AP Bio review system on learn-biology.com. And let's look at some multiple choice questions. We've got 450. And we're going to start our quiz. We're going to go to ecology. Expand that. And we just want to do, I got a lot of community ecology questions, but I don't want to do that many. Let's just do 10 questions. And we're not even going to be able to do that many. This is a tough question. All right. 2 biology students conducted a study on the fungal disease apple scab. They used 2 different strains of the fungus, V. inequalis, and 2 varieties of Gala and Enterprise apples. On each apple, they made 3 holes 3 millimeters in diameter and inserted agar cylinders colonized by one of the 2 strains of fungi or with sterile agar. After 14 days, they measured the diameter of the lesions, the areas with tissue damage that occurred. They used 10 apples of each variety. Their data is shown below. Error bars represent 2 times the standard error of the mean. So I'm going to make this a little smaller. And I think that's the best we can do here. And I hope people can see this okay. Which of the following is an accurate conclusion to draw about the effect of fungal colonization on different apple varieties? So I hope everybody can see those 4. And let's do 1, 2, 3, 4 as your answers. 1, 2, 3, or 4. And I'd love to see all of you chat in with an answer. Okay, we've got one answer coming in. Hmm? Okay, we're going to go with crystal answers. Lily, it looks like you backed off a little bit there. It's 2. Lily thinks 1. Okay, so this is what happens on learn-biology.com. You're getting some feedback. No. Look again at the graph. The bigger bars for Gala indicate that the fungal strains were able to colonize that variety to a greater extent than they were able to colonize the enterprise apples. So bigger is worse in this case. In other words, the size of the lesion is more. And that's why, like, for example, with the control, there's hardly any lesion at all. It's a very, very small lesion. It's basically the size of the hole that was put in there. Let's do one more question, and we're going to wrap things up for tonight. Related question. And also, I just want to emphasize that, like, we do a lot of case studies on learn-biology.com. So it's a lot of kind of data analysis, which is similar to the kind of questions that you'll experience on the AP Bio exam. Researchers inoculated 10 pea seeds with different strains of bacteria that grow on roots and planted them in sterile soil in a greenhouse. After 21 days, the researchers washed the soil from the roots of each plant and measured the mass. So here we've got 3 strains of bacteria, strain A, strain B, strain C, and uninoculated. And assume that the bacteria benefit from their interaction with the pea plants, knowing that which strain of bacteria would best be described as mutualistic. Okay. You know what, guys? Can you change your answers to A, B, C, or uninoculated? Because I'm not sure if we're on this question or the last question. I'm looking for A's, B's, C's, or un. One of those in the chat, please. Okay. So if it's mutualism, then the peas are going to grow best. And that's why, let's try Lily's answer. Way to go. Mutualism is a type of relationship in which both partners benefit from their interactions. The fact that the host plant is growing more with strain C indicates that we've got a mutualistic relationship. Nice job. Let's go like this. Let's go like this. Folks, this has been another fabulous session. I want to talk about a couple of things I want you to do. I have put together a checklist that you can download, apbiosuccess.com/checklist. Download it, and you can get this checklist, and you can do a couple of things with it. If you find that there's an area where you're uncertain, these links take you to tutorials on learn-biology.com that will help you fill in the gaps. And then there's the unit review pages. We were on one that has flashcards, multiple choice quizzes, practice FRQs, and click on challenges. What you want to do is you study for the final of finals, the AP Bio exam. You want to find your gaps and fill them. Learn-biology.com and the checklist are very efficient ways to do that. Keep on attending these live review sessions, and please spread the word about them, because the more people there are, they're fun. They're more fun. And also, I am doing these Zoom sessions that are available to students with a learn-biology.com account. So get one. It's only $24.95 at learn-biology.com/student sign up. Okay. And once you're there, I'll send you a registration link for the Zoom sessions, which are just more interactive and more fun and a better learning environment. And I would love to see you all there. And if you want the schedule of those reviews, they're at learn-biology.com/live-reviews. All right. Don't forget any of those dashes. Please sign up for learn-biology.com/AP Biology. It's the website that guarantees your success. It's really going to be a wonderful experience for you to be there. And we've also got an app, Biomania, and the next review session is tomorrow night, 3 weeks exactly before the AP Bio exam. So we're going to do this. We're going to get to the 4 or 5, and your best partner in doing this is going to be your subscription to learn-biology.com. Go to learn-biology.com/AP Biology. That'll take you to the same place. So I'm really, really grateful to you for spending your time with me tonight. This was fabulous, and I look forward to seeing so many of you tomorrow. And sign up for learn-biology.com, and then we can start seeing each other on Zoom as well. Fantastic seeing you. Everybody, have a good night. Stay safe. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye, everybody.